Hello, America. Welcome back to my presentations. This presentation is called Fake Property Tax in Massachusetts, presented to the American people and the people of Massachusetts, December 1st, the year 10 ABC. That means after Bitcoin. There's 4 reasons why the house tax is fake. The first is that the right to live can't be taxed. 2. The state is unable to define the word house. 3. There is a lack of territorial jurisdiction. 4. There is a lack of delegated power. Let's begin with the first. Rights can't be taxed. It is a right to seek safety. It is a right to seek shelter from the elements, and that is a fundamental right of life, and it is secured by the Massachusetts Constitution, to wit, the right of enjoying and defending our lives and liberties, that of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, in fine, that of seeking and obtaining our safety and happiness. That, being a right, shall not be infringed. If we have a right to choose how we seek safety and happiness, then there can be no infringement, legislation, or tax on the means by which we choose to obtain that right. I, like most people, choose to live, to be secure, to seek, and to obtain my happiness in my house. Therefore, the state cannot violate, tax, or legislate our rights. According to the Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their houses shall not be violated. In addition, according to Murdoch versus Pennsylvania, a state may not impose a charge or a license tax for the enjoyment of a right granted by the federal Constitution. And as we know, the federal Constitution grants us life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. Where rights secured by the Constitution are involved, there can be no rulemaking or legislation which would abrogate them. And that was by the Supreme Court in Miranda versus Arizona. Number 2, the state can't define the word house. Why? Because in order that the Constitution may have proper force and effect, Congress or the state legislature cannot, by any definition it may adopt, redefine its terms, since it cannot, by legislation, alter the Constitution, from which alone it derives its power to legislate, and within whose limitations alone that power can be lawfully exercised. See Eisner versus Macomber. The term house is not classified by the state. See the occupational codes by the Massachusetts Property Classification System, which is published by the Boston Assessing Department. That's their web address at the bottom. You can find that PDF. This PDF sums up all the terms that are found in the Mass General Laws. And you'll see that there's 6 houses that are mentioned. There is a rooming house, a fraternity house, a warehouse, a boathouse, a greenhouse, and a field house. But where do you see the common house that you and I live in and seek and obtain safety and happiness in? It's not there. Okay? So the government might come back and say, well, the state building code defines the physical characteristics and requirements of a house, and therefore whatever you live in, because it falls under the state building code, is a house. That is a perversion of the truth, because the state building code, one might ask, well, what is the state building code? Is it the state's code for buildings, or is it the code for state buildings? Well, Mass State Building Code, which is 780 CMR 101, answers this question. It says this code shall be the building code for all towns, cities, state agencies, or authorities in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 143. In other words, my house is not a state building. The state building code doesn't apply to my house. The house I own can be anything and any size within my means. For example, a tent is my house if I own and choose to live in it. A tent house can also be my house if I own and choose to live in it. A log cabin is my house if I own and choose to live in it, and a mansion is also my house if I own and choose to live in it. In fact, as a matter of right to live, to seek and obtain my safety and happiness, none of these houses are taxable. Number 3, there is a lack of territorial jurisdiction. The government's territorial jurisdiction is well defined. Federal government defines that Congress shall have power to exercise exclusive legislation over all places purchased from the states, such as forts, arsenals, and other needful buildings, in addition to the district not exceeding 10 miles square. Also, Congress shall have the power over territory or other property belonging to the United States. See what I mean? Belonging to the United States. That's a key phrase right there. In Massachusetts, the sovereignty and jurisdiction of the Commonwealth shall extend to all places within its boundaries. And places is defined at Mass General Law, Chapter 4, Section 7, as to mean a city or town. In other words, my land is not property belonging to the United States or subject to the sovereignty and jurisdiction of the Commonwealth. Now here a government official might say to me, so you think the state has no territorial jurisdiction over your land just because it's not a place? No, actually it has no jurisdiction over my land because according to the Supreme Court, where a statute includes an explicit definition, we must follow that definition even if it varies from that term's ordinary meaning. So when we talk about places, it means government places, not my places, okay? I don't have to prove that my house and land is not a place. Government must prove that it is. If you want to know where that is, go to Federal Rules of Evidence or Massachusetts Guide to Evidence, number 301, Presumptions. Go read that. Okay, so lack of delegated power is the fourth reason why government can't tax your house or, for that matter, the land that you live on. In the Constitution, Article 4, Section 4 guarantees a republican form of government. And what is a republican form of government? Well, it's one in which the powers of sovereignty are vested in the people and are exercised by the people, either directly or through representatives chosen by the people to whom those powers are specifically delegated. In other words, if you don't have a power that you can delegate, the government cannot exercise that power. Another functional definition of a republic can be found in the Wyoming Constitution, Article 1, Section 7. And it says, absolute arbitrary power over the lives, liberty, and property of free men exists nowhere in a republic, not even in the largest majority. This has the consequence that in a republic, does your neighbor have a right to tax your house? I would say no. What if your neighbor brought 10,000 or 100,000 of his friends? Do they have a right to tax your house? I don't think so. So obviously not. So where does the government derive its just powers when no such delegated power exists? Well, let's see what the Supreme Court says in Juilliard versus Greenman as far as government powers go. The Supreme Court says, there is no such thing as a power of inherent sovereignty in the government of the United States. It is a government of delegated powers, supreme within its prescribed sphere, but powerless outside of it. Government can exercise no power which they have not, by their constitution, entrusted to it. All else is withheld. If the power is not in terms granted, it does not exist. That's right. Let's see. Which term is granted? It's a multiple choice question. Arms, house, income, or places. Which of these four terms is granted as a power for government to exercise? Well, we already covered this, and if you've been paying attention, you know the answer is places, because places mean government places. Again, see Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, etc. How about arms? Does the government have power over your arms? Not according to the Second Amendment. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. How about your house? Well, not according to the Fourth Amendment. The right of the people to be secure in their houses shall not be violated. How about income? Can government reach into your pocket and take what is yours? Think about it. Can your neighbor do the same to you? If they can't, then the government can't either. And according to the court, the general term income is not defined in the Internal Revenue Code. What does that tell you? It tells you that the income tax is not on your income. The income tax is on your federal income, the code word for which is gross income. So if you don't want to be paying a federal income tax, then don't make any federal income. Simple. Okay, so the power to tax our houses is not in terms granted, and it does not exist. How do they tax my house? That's an interesting question. And actually, it's very easy. It's how government does almost everything. It's by your consent. What do I mean by that? See, because the state can't tax your house, they offer to tax your residential property. These terms of contract are offered and defined at Mass General Laws, Chapter 59, Section 2A, under Class 1 residential property, which in short includes rooming houses and bed and breakfast homes. Those are businesses. Okay, so based on your consent or your failure to object to these terms, the state presumes your voluntary compliance and demands an excise from you for operating a rooming house or a bed and breakfast home business. And that excise is a cut of your business, which you don't have. Wait, what? Is the state putting me under terms of contract? What contract? What terms? Have you ever seen that contract? Have you ever read the terms? Well, that contract is called the statute. And that statute, as the Supreme Court says, are acts authorizing the making of contracts with the government. But in every case, the person entering into such a contract must look to the statute under which it is made and see for himself that his contract comes within the terms of the law. So not only are they offering you a contract, guess what? You have the right to refuse that contract. Just look at the Declaration of Independence, right? Government is instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So don't give them that consent. There it is. You can refuse consent right here. So let's look at the mechanics of how property tax is collected. What must be done before the collector collects tax? Well, the town assessor must first assess. What is assess? It means to distribute taxation in a proportion founded on the burden of on the proportion of burden and benefit. Okay, you have an assessor's office in every town, and then after they do their job, only then can the collector collect. That's how it works everywhere. So what benefit are they talking about? Well, it's the benefit of making a profit from the privilege of running a rooming house or a bed and breakfast home in your Class 1 residential property. Okay? Doesn't mean living in a house. They can't tax living in a house because we've already gone through that. It is a right. They can only tax a business, and that's what they're doing. So what do? Well, the first thing you do is you make sure you own your house, because if you have a mortgage, an outstanding mortgage, there's a clause in there that connects the mortgage with the state, and they're allowed to foreclose on your house for not paying their property tax. Okay? But let's assume that you own your house and you have no outstanding mortgage. Then as king, questions would be the first thing I would do. First question is the residential property tax a direct tax or an indirect tax? Please produce the law imposing a direct tax on the land, house, or other property belonging to the people. You see what words I'm using? That's right from Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2 of the Constitution. Other property belonging to the people, okay? And then, because there's no direct tax, at least not in Massachusetts, you can ask, what is the subject matter or activity excised by the indirect tax? And of course, if they told you the truth, that they're taxing you on your non-existent business, that would be a lie. I mean, that would be fraud, and they would give up their position and you wouldn't have to pay them. So that's why you ask the next question, is what fact supports the presumption that I operate a rooming house or a bed and breakfast home? And of course, there is no fact unless you actually run a bed and breakfast home. Next question is regarding territorial jurisdiction, and you ask, what fact supports the presumption that the places, remember the word places, that the places over which the sovereignty and jurisdiction of the Commonwealth extends includes my land or my house thereon? And of course, there is no fact, and they can't answer you. We've tried this, and we've got the city's response. And you know what it is? Here it is. The city's response. Crickets. That's right. And you know what that means. Silence can only be equated with fraud where there is a legal or moral duty to speak, or where an inquiry left unanswered would be intentionally misleading. We all know that. The courts just wrote it out for us to understand and to intellectualize. We all know that. When somebody's trying to pull a fraud over you, what do they do when you ask the right questions? Silence. That's how government works. So if you're gonna, or if you have to do this, okay, then make sure you have the support of your village. It takes a village to save a house, but if you can't save the house, you can't save the village. Like as Ben Franklin used to say, we must all hang together, or assuredly we shall all hang separately. There you go. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and comment. You have a duty to know and to obey the law, to share the truth, and to keep your brother from harm and injustice and tyranny. Thank you.